The following podcast is brought to you by A.C.T, Agorist Center of Thought. Here only on the Voluntary Virtues Network. Every Saturday, 9 and 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join us on the dark side of radio. Agora, Anarchy, Action. Welcome. This is the Agora Underground here on the Voluntary Virtues Network. I am your host, Comrade Dick. Want to thank you guys for tuning in. This is our 5th broadcast here on the Voluntary Virtues Network, and we're loving it. We do hope that you guys are as well. As you know, we have been breaking down Samuel Edward Conkin's, the founder of Agorism. We have been breaking down the primer that he wrote for Agorism. And a couple of things that we've learned thus far, to sum up, first couple chapters, we learned that, hey, Agorism agrees on every single point with the Austrian economic perception of catalytics, right, of economics. This is foundational to emphasize, because many people have the illusion that somehow Agorism is mutualist or collectivist, socialist in some economic sense, when clearly it's not. Some of the other things we learned about too were counter-economics, right? The idea that there are so many rules, so many, countless amounts of regulation that the government has put on the books, that it is nearly impossible to go throughout a regular day without being considered a criminal, without breaking a couple felonies, without breaking a couple of regulations, without even you being aware of the fact. This proves, and this highly suggests, that the freedom fighter will totally disregard these regulations, right? We nullify these laws that have no boundaries in reality. Counter-economics, it's an important subject. We also learned about libertarianism, the philosophies found within libertarianism, how Agorism completely supports and adheres to these philosophies. And then we started reading a little bit about what Agorism actually is, and we're wrapping up the book. And we will, after we read this book, we will cover the Mises Institute, their critique of Agorism. We'll see what's up, if it holds any water, if they have any valid arguments against it. That should probably be 2 episodes down the way or so, I think, till we get that going there. So we were just here on page 80 of the Agorist Primer, and there's a section that we didn't get to last week, entitled 2 words or so about national defense. And it starts off, full agorism obviously needs no national defense. There are no nations to defend and no nations from which to be defended. Local protection against occasional criminals is sufficient. Once in a while, criminals might band together to overwhelm a single protection company. Then the Agorist Protection Agency merely needs to hire another protection company to assist it. Similarly, should one protection company go bad, a few of the hundreds of others would be enough to apprehend its agents and shut it down. But in fact, market forces would sap such a company's destructive power long before it came to that. People raised in an Agorist society would stop paying its insurance premiums and shift to its competitors. Detective and investigative agencies would terminate their contracts with this rogue agency, right? Arbitrators would consistently rule against its aggressive moves. Agents working for the company would quit and go elsewhere, or else be labeled criminals, right, by the rest of society. Secretaries and office help would walk out rather than have their reputations sullied by associating with such unagorist, right, with such criminal types. Even restaurants and grocery stores would refuse to sell to the renegades or would hike their prices to show their additional loss of subjective value in dealing with such coercive filth. What a wonderful society that would be, wouldn't it? If people all banded together in order to fight violence and coercion, that would be awesome. That would just be awesome. That's what we're fighting for here. He continues on. Perhaps the company turning state would pay higher prices to hold on to their employees and supplies or replace them. But where would they get their money? They would lose customers the moment they started to act like a government. If it is just as likely that they would collapse if they attempted to live by stealing, tax collecting, since they would be compelled by force or other companies to cease and desist their aggression against these companies' clients. That's a very good point. I mean, to wage warfare is extremely expensive, and this has been covered, many, many times throughout by many, economists, by many historians, by many, academics within the libertarian movement. Is the fact that war is costly. It costs a lot of money to pay people to be willing to put their lives at risk for you. It costs a lot of money to maintain capital, right? Your Humvees, your cars, trucks, supply lines in war, right? So war is expensive, and without a central bank, without the fairy tale power to just create money out of thin air at the expense of the people through a central bank, it's almost impossible to wage war on a overly massive scale. This is just common economics. So they're pointing out that Konkin here is pointing out how essentially any security agency that decides to go renegade and decides to start become like a state, collecting taxes or collecting revenue against people's will and stealing from them and such, the whole society is going to close themselves off to this company, right? People are going to refuse to continue paying their premiums. They're going to switch over to their competitors. People aren't going to want to do business with this company anymore. People are going to give them bad ratings. Arbitrators are going to rule against them. So every turn they take, they're actually, in the long run, losing their reputation. They're losing their money. They're losing their that bread on the table, right? And who wants to lose that? He continues on here that people raised and educated to love an Agorist society could not fall for tax paying. And if they ever do, we will sink all the way down the road of corruption and oppression to the level of statism that we enjoy today. The second word about territorial defense deals with the concerns of most people when they meet some version of anarchy, even the businesslike, efficient, free market kind. How does the non-state defend itself against all the states still left? The glib answer is, let me count the ways. A few should suffice to allay nameless fears. First, the context must not be forgotten. Government will not disappear until it is rejected by the overwhelming majority of people under its rule. It is highly unlikely that other people in other countries around the world will be unaffected should North America out its state through this libertarian infection. A libertarian international formed in 1980 had its first convention in Zurich in August of '82 and continues into the 21st century as the International Society for Individual Liberty, ISIL. Many of these members could be relied upon to act as fifth columnists in their home countries to stop their government from attacking the obviously peaceful anarchy. Second, although we do not rule out naked aggression, remember that wars are caused by both sides. There is an entire branch of libertarian theory we skipped in making this presentation. Actually, more than one. It's called revisionist history. which rips the mask off government war propaganda to reveal the gleaming skull underneath. The United States, for example, has not been involved in a single war since the first revolution that could not have been avoided, nor one that would have cost American citizens their liberty had it been avoided. Said liberty, to be sure, which they were already losing to their own government. Several volumes have been written about each of these wars from establishment and revisionist perspectives. But let me just list the bold, simple conclusions here, and you can research for yourself where I'm right, where Konkin was right. And revisionism, historical revisionism, is a good point to bring up. As libertarians, we acknowledge the fact that, for the majority, academia, historians, right, those that are given the duties of cataloging events of the day, most likely work for the state and are paid for, and have their retirement and have all their benefits paid for tax dollars, taxpayers. This is why any cursory look in history quickly reveals state propaganda, right? State propaganda in order to get us into World War II, in order to get us into the Spanish-American War, in order to get us into Vietnam, and so on and so forth. So revisionism, right, is the science, the historical science. History is one of those funny sciences where really all we have are notes and letters from the past, and we need to piece history together based on as many accounts that we can have, written accounts that we have available. So essentially, historical revisionism is the practice of going to the evidence that determines what historical outlook we have, going to that evidence and actually reanalyzing it and analyzing as much as you can of it. And this has led to new discoveries in history, as far as discoveries that might not fit the normal establishment story as to what actually happened on those given days. So here Konkin brings up first the War of 1812. And he says the U.S. warhawks sought a land grab in Canada. Pretext for the war, imprisonment of American seamen in ships running the British blockade of Napoleon, true but trivial in comparison to war and its cost in lives and freedom. So apparently, in the War of 1812 against Canada, right, trying to grab some land in Canada, we had issues with the British having a blockade of Napoleon and his forces and his supplies, and that was excuse enough for us to get involved. How convenient for the state, right? It's just like this Malaysian flight that got shot down over the Ukraine. I mean, you turn on talk radio, and all these neo-hawks, all these war chickens, all these chicken hawks, are just, all suggesting we somehow go to war with Russia or put more economic sanctions on Russia. Very convenient for the war system and the war state and the military-industrial complex. Next, he goes on to the Mexican War. He says, U.S. Southern interests sought land grab of Texas and other Mexican territories to form more slave states, to balance off new northern free states. The pretext, Mexico attacked Republic of Texas and thus U.S. soil. Probably not, and Texas was not the U.S. soil at the moment. War between the states. The North wished to enslave the South. The South justifiably wished to be free of the North. Pretext, the abolition of slavery in the South. North kept slavery in northern territories also. Hardcore abolitionists supported both Southern secession and abolition of slavery as same issue of freedom, as one and the same. So funny how secession is viewed as a Southern slave, holding some kind of racist opinion of some sort when you talk to most people about secession. and the 10th Amendment. Um, it's ridiculous, right? Ridiculous to think that somehow because you want to declare political autonomy, right? Political freedom, then somehow you're a racist and a slave owner. Come on now. I mean, it sounds like the progressive movement was very alive and well in Civil War times. And then I mean, it's just funny, it's just crazy. So a true freedom fighter like Spooner, Lysander Spooner, was against slavery. He was an abolitionist, and he was also a secessionist. Right? He was for states being able to secede from the Union, and for family members, right, for families to be able to secede from the state, and individuals to secede from the family, so on and so forth, right? So we have the beautiful nature of anarchy. And then we got here the Spanish-American War. The U.S. interests grabbed Spanish colonies, Cuba, Philippines, for exploitation and turned the U.S. state into an old world empire. Pretext: U.S. battleship Maine was attacked in the Cuban harbor. Even though innocent Spain apologized anyway and bent over backwards to avoid war. And there was a lot of issues with that boat too. I mean, there was only one death, I believe, in the I guess the armory room in on the ship, and it's just really weird. The explosion, most likely came from within the ship, and most likely a false flag. Right? There was no report of any backfire towards any other Spanish ships or anything like that. So definitely very interesting, and it's in our history books, slightly talked about. World War One, he continues on. U.S. interests, especially bankers, bet on Great Britain and moved U.S. in to save their investments when Russia pulled out, leaving Germany one front. Pretext: German U-boats attacked British ship carrying Americans. Declaration of unrestricted submarine warfare zones by Germany. Trivial relative to war, and U.S. ships should have taken their chances if they insisted on running huge risks for high profits by penetrating the blockades. Great Britain was blockading Germany, and other interests wanted to replay War of 1812 and attack Britain. So yeah, I mean, you right. I mean, it's like you send supply lines into a war situation, and then all of a sudden, you declare war on the other country. It justifies it whenever they shoot you down, right? I mean, that's a pretty like it's just a pretty. You can just smell the setup and the rat, the wet rat in that situation. Let's see here. Let's see here. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. This PDF here jumped all of a sudden to a different page here. Having to scroll here, but I should be getting there any minute. All right. So just read about the Spanish-American War. Just read about World War One, sending in supply lines into areas where there's German U-boats and there's a blockade, and what do you expect to happen? World War II, Europe 1939. Britain gave Poland a blank check treaty if they would hold out 99% German Danzig from Germany. The last adjustment of the Versailles Treaty, the Treaty of Versailles, yeah, that was a horrible treaty for the Germans, ending in World War I, that penalized Germany. Also, Britain and France refused alliance with Russia against the fascist menace. Although Bolshevik Russia was seriously threatened by Nazi aggression, unlike Danzig-less Poland, not to mention distant Great Britain, and thus pushed USSR to German side in fear. Poland was overwhelmingly outnumbered and still refused to return German Danzig. Pretext: Germany invaded Poland without provocation. Nonsense. Allied war propaganda. Poland was so surprised that they were already fully mobilized and standing on the border on September 11th, 1939. September 1st, I'm sorry, 1939. That would have been weird. Um, World War II, the Pacific, 1941. The United States New Deal administration sought entry to the European theater above. World War II required an attack since 80% of Americans opposed bailing out Britain. Again, the Japanese were strangled by British blockade aided by neutral U.S. ships. Japanese funds in U.S. were seized by U.S. government, and Japanese emissaries for peace were insulted and scorned. Pretext: Japan attacked Pearl Harbor naval installations. Few, if any, innocent U.S. civilians injured. Japan knew it would be dragged into war and would lose. It struck first to delay the inevitable. Japanese Bushido code was offended deliberately and provocatively by U.S. status. And there's a lot of study on that as far as Pearl Harbor, and essentially we allowed that to happen knowing it was on its way. I mean, we even had a couple of Japanese submarines shot down and sunk before they got there, and I mean we saw it clearly on the radar, except for the fact that Hawaii's radar system was dismantled that day for whatever reason, and they didn't pick up anything. So just a lot of iffy stuff about that, and it's just so hard, to go back in history, and all we have are just documents and just notes, daily notes of politicians, nonetheless. Korean War, artificial division of Korea. World War II began between a northern communist dictatorship and a southern pro-U.S. state dictatorship. U.S. entered to prop up colonies. France and Japan were abandoning in Southeast Asia for a variety of corporate interests and Soviet containment reasons. Pretext: communist aggression, which involved China and Russia. China attacked the U.S. after American troops threatened to cross the Yalu River into China. Russia sat back and sold arms, as the U.S. had done before landing troops. Continues on. Vietnam, U.S. attempted to keep former French Indochina from passing in the Eastern Bloc. See Korean War. This was a continuation from 1954. As became obvious immediately after, when China switched over to U.S. side, communist countries are not necessarily threats to the U.S. Isn't that so true? How many communist nations are great allies of the United States? Loved and adored. Their flags are, flown over the White House whenever their dictators come and visit. Pretext: defend South Vietnamese who wanted Western-style democracy from communism form of status. South Vietnamese were split, and there was never anything even nearly as free or democracy there under the various generals and the dying dictatorship. El Salvador, certain U.S. industries and banks have heavy investments in Latin America, and they feared their expropriation by communist or Marxist governments. Pretext: Salvadorians want democracy, not communism. Salvadorians voted in U.S. monitored elections and got a genuine fascist government. The Arena Party of Roberto D. Abusun, and massive murder of Democrats, let alone communists, by Arena death squads. The U.S. then overruled the results of the election they had demanded in the first place. Happens all the time, right? Ukraine, ring a bell? Had some elections there that U.S. overruled. Hamas, right? Voting for who that they would be in power, right? The people in Palestine. we don't need a two-state solution. We need a no-state solution. It just keeps going. I mean, he just keeps breaking down here different points as far as all that. But he continues on. I guess he goes back here to World War I. U.S. sought to preserve its interest in Saudi Arabian oil fields, fearing if Kuwait fell. Oh, this is Iraq War. I'm sorry, I'm misreading things here. Iraq War I, right? Desert Storm. U.S. sought to preserve its interest in Saudi Arabian oil fields, fearing that if Kuwait fell and former U.S. ally Saddam Hussein enriched himself from oil profits there, then Saudi Arabia might be next. Pretext: Iraq invaded Kuwait, separated from Iraq by British in 1932, to regain its ports and to seize oil fields on the theory that they were using a slant drill to drink the milkshake of Iraq's al-Rumafa fields. Just nuts, right? Always just these good pretexts and oh, we're going in to help people and we're going in to be defensive force only, and really you realize they were just setting it up the whole time. Or if it's genuine, the response to that kind of massive warfare isn't justified by the acts that are being done. Afghan War of Afghanistan, right? The U.S. and U.K. attempt to secure Afghanistan to protect a proposed natural gas pipeline from Turkmenistan to Pakistan and India, passing right through the Kandahar province. This in an effort to counteract perceived Russo-Iranian energy trade in the region. The pretext to do this was that the Taliban gave aid and comfort to 9/11 attackers and to the coordinator Osama bin Laden, that they oppressed women, and that they served as a training haven for Islamic fundamentalist terrorists. That was the pretext to get in there. Really is for the pipeline, right? We know that. Iraq War II. U.S. continued to perceive Iraq as a threat to its oil interest in the Middle East, especially after Iraq's scorched earth retreat from the Kuwait oil fields in 1991. Yeah, remember when Saddam Hussein lit all the oil fields on fire? In addition, personal grudges may have played a part, since the sitting president's father had once been targeted for assassination by Hussein himself. Pretext: Saddam Hussein repeated scofflawing and numerous UN resolutions and rumors that Iraq still pursued weapons of mass destruction. By the way, those quickie explanations are not meant to convince you that the US was wrong and that the other sides were right. The Agorist viewpoint is that the US state was wrong and its war opponents were wrong. Both or either could have avoided any of the above wars. Well, yeah, I mean, there is no such thing as the utopian government. And for those people that pick sides based on government and states and flags, I mean, you're just tricking yourself. If you think that some countries are going to treat you better than another country, or that somehow they're going to take care of you and ensure that that you prosper and have a good life. I mean, what a joke, right? We know that they're just simply parasitic. It's a parasitic system that lives off our labor. And as a result of that, right, it always leads to more parasitism and always leads to eventual collapse. And this is why countries go to war, right, to blame the economic collapse on the foreigner, on the opponent, right, that they made, whether made legitimately or just made up. So, I mean, that's just their modus operandi, right? Warfare. War is the life of the state. And that's very important to point out, is that as anarchists, right, as agorists, we don't stand. It's not that we stand with Palestine and we don't stand with Israel. We stand for, right, a no-state solution. It's not that we stand with Iran and not the United States, or that we stand with Russia, not the United States, just because we're criticizing the United States and its policies. No, we obviously realize and call out the fact that all governments use violence and the initiation of force in order to maintain power over their given geographic area. So it's just to the Agorists, it's a bunch of it's rats fighting over scraps, right? That's all the states are. So I mean, different states, as different governments are. So we see all of them as parasites, not just the U.S. Continues on here. And before we forget, there is an obvious third way the North American non-state defends itself against the state around it, if it is Agorist. The protection agencies form larger syndicates than the ones they form in the case we mentioned above, of the local protection company going renegade. If all the policyholders of all the insurance or protection companies are threatened by invasion, they will throw all their combined resources in higher technology, judging by free enterprise's past performance on defense of the common ground. Fourth, the people would rise up in militias or guerrilla units to defend their incredibly free society. There were advanced hints of this strategy when the Ukrainian anarchist army under Nestor Makhno had no trouble raising militia to protect the local farmers and protect the local fanners from the roving armies of Reds and Whites during the Russian Revolution. This is interesting, though, right? I mean, these are arguments against the idea that if the United States or Texas were to become agorist anarchists, that we would have an invasion from foreign states. Well, these protection agencies, right, could band together and form a syndicate in order to fight against the organized state, right? And as agorists, we should really, as anarchists, we should really look into, you know, mutual. What is it? Mutual Shield, right? Um, it's the first agorist defense agency of the Agora, right? I think it's Mutual Shield. Let's see here. I need to get an account on Mutual Shield, but yeah, I mean they have their whole plan up there. Yeah, mutualshield.com, shieldmutual.com. That's shieldmutual.com. Definitely check them out because it's this idea that we can have representatives, right? If enough people get a representative agency to defend them against the state, then we can actually get things done. Imagine if 10 million people signed up for Shield Mutual, right? And that's 10 million people collectively bargaining against the state, collectively bargaining to the state and telling them, hey, we want to separate, we want to be autonomous, we want to be free, and we have a collective bargaining, and we have this entity that's going to represent us and defend us in case you want to aggress upon us. I mean, it's a great stepping stone in it. It really is. Definitely encourage y'all to look into that. So let's see here. I'm not familiar with this Ukrainian anarchist army or Nestor Makhno, so I couldn't really tell you much on that. It's interesting stuff, though, to look into. Um, Fifth point is that most wars have had a strong economic component. Often, access to goods or natural resources was barred by protectionist state economic policies. The anarchy would have full free trade with full access. Anyone wanting anything produced in the North American anarchy could easily buy it without taxes and without tariffs, and at a cheaper price than anywhere else. Notice how giant communist China went out of its way not to conquer tiny Hong Kong, although the British were ready to toss it to them anytime they asked. And finally did. Even now, Hong Kong has not seen red Chinese tanks rolling through its streets to crush its capitalist minions. In fact, much of China has become a mirror of Hong Kong, with party leaders and the People's Liberation Army growing rich on market activities, white, black, and gray. Check also the little free ports and cities of Monaco, Andorra, Liechtenstein, Singapore, and San Marino. That's another great point, right? When it's that quote that's associated with Frederic Bastiat, but no one really knows whether he said it or not. But it's what is it? It's if goods don't cross borders, then soldiers will, right? And that's what causes war, is the idea that you put economic sanctions on people and you stop trading with them and you stop doing business with them and you put tariffs on their goods. This causes tension. Is usually the first stages in a war, right? As the economic aspect. You stop trading with them simply. You charge them more to trade on your land. This causes tension between the countries. How could this tension ever even be built in an Agora society, where there is no taxes, there is no tariffs, there is no barring of the selling or trading of goods? It's going to be really hard. I mean, it's hard to hate somebody that is constantly willing to trade with you and do a business with do business with you, make a contract with you, get into some of that voluntary action with you. It's very hard to start a war like that. 6, and he continues on, well, uh, and we'll have to stop eventually, so let it be here. Okay. Well, the 6th point that says that we don't have to fear other states invading us if we decide to go anarchist is that the states will quarrel amongst themselves. Since the anarchy threatens no state immediately, point 2, long term it does, as a shining example of better conditions. But other states with standing militaries do threaten all the time. What state would want the easy access to resources, point 5, and the anarchy cut off by another state using it? That could mean war. But among the states, while the anarchy freely sells to all sides without favor or penalty. That's a good point, right? I mean, they're going to be constantly looking over their back at the other governments who are more of a threat to them and their farm, right? Their cattle farm, their tax haven. The other states are more of a threat to the oligarchy of other nations, right? Than some anarchist, little blip on the map. No, that's not a threat to them, except in the long run, right? Like Honkin pointed out, in the example of being, you know, what spontaneous order and human action can accomplish. Those are beautiful things. Critics of free market anarchy often try to have their cake and eat it too. For example, they may argue that there are too few states. What happens if the states gang up? And at the same time, too many. How can one anarchy survive among all those states? As in the case of historical examples such as revolutionary France and revolutionary Russia, where the surrounding states did gang up to crush the new type of state, if the country is big enough, it will survive even foreign interference, even in the middle of a civil war, which both experience, let alone Agorist peace. Great points. Additional tactics for defense and reasons for non-aggression are left as an exercise for the reader. Yeah, we're always encouraging you to do your own research, do your own homework. Sometimes I know, you should feel guilty when you go home and you're turning off the light at the end of the day and you didn't learn anything new that day. You didn't bother reading anything, not even an article or something. Come on. We got to constantly be learning new concepts, new ideas, becoming better familiarized and better equipped with the concepts and ideas we already have in order to better communicate them to other people, right? We don't just want to be half-assed at this, right? We want to be well educated, well sharpened tools for the intellectual dismantling of the state. We can do it. You can do it. And it starts with ourselves. It starts with our family. It starts with our relatives. It starts with our close community, those we do business with, and it extends from there to probably us here, right, on the web. That's probably the next realm, the next ring of it. The Agorist path.
this next section here. Getting from here, statism, to there, agorism, is the second and perhaps defining characteristic of the latter. Unlike libertarianism, agorism offers both goal and path as an internally consistent package deal. We've covered this already. Libertarianism is not consistent as far as the political wing of libertarianism, as far as what we consider the political movement known as libertarianism. It is not consistent. For libertarianism calls out the fact that the state itself is an initiator of violence, of force, that this is unlawful. Yet, they seek to use this same unlawful beast, known as the state, to somehow curtail its own power, its own destruction. Good luck. You're going to need it because you're not going to go anywhere with that. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So there is no taking over the mafia and reforming it. There's only opting out of it. And this is what Agorism offers. So the short answer, he continues, is given in axiom 4. A longer answer is, quote, applying counter-economics to all your actions and linking preferentially with others who do so create an ever bigger agora. How that works and what 2 things you need to watch for is an excellent chapter with which we end this primer. So let me just read that point one more time. Axiom 4, I don't recall exactly what it was. I'll look it up in a second here. But he says that that applying counter-economics to all your actions and linking preferentially with others who do so creates an ever bigger agora. So we need to apply counter-economics to every single action that we do, right? This doesn't mean that we go out of our way to simply break regulation and break laws, so-called laws, because they're victimless crimes, right? So that's, yeah. But it's not that we go out of our way to, not wear our seatbelt or to, smoke a cigarette in a non-smoking area, right? That's not the point. The point is essentially that we want to limit, if the state is what it is, right? This machine used for the destruction of people, right? Used for the enslavement of humanity, then we cannot, as anarchists, conscientiously, we cannot support that in any way, right? This includes voting, right? This includes waving the flag, right? Being patriotic, and it even goes as far as to include taxation, right? Once we realize that the state is the biggest initiator of violence, that the state is the biggest theft, initiator of theft, the biggest thief on the block. Once we realize that the state is the biggest murderer in this hemisphere, the United States government, if not the world. Once we realize that, then we cannot conscientiously continue to give our tax dollars to the system. Yes, I know that they will continue to print the money in order to fund these atrocities, but they can't have our consent. They can't have our money to do so. They can't even expect us to play their game, to even use their money. This is why we need to slowly start opting out of the system. And the more people that do this, the more community we can build in order to maintain it, right? In order to have a division of labor that is completely agorist, completely in the gray. That would be a beautiful thing. I mean, we can get a lot of things done in that manner. And for those, this brings up a really good critique of agorism. The idea that it's a critique that Rothbard had against it. And it's his main issue was that black and gray markets, right, because of their nature, that they're anti-state, right, that they're under the radar of the state and are always under threat of being shut down, penalized, fined, whatever. Essentially, that you can't have higher order production, right? This is a critique of agorism. You can't have Rothbard would said that cars, for example, would be an issue. Like you can't something as complicated as a vehicle surely cannot be produced on and strictly in the Agora in the gray market, right? It'd be nearly impossible. Someone down the line is going to be paying taxes. Someone is going to be um, supporting the state apparatus, right? Funding the state apparatus in some way, indirectly, through taxation down that production chain. And though that may be the case, there are viable explanations against that. I mean, Apple comes to mind pretty good. I mean, they don't they didn't pay any taxes for 2013. I don't think none whatsoever. Now, I'd be curious to know how many subsidies Apple got and how many patents, right, government patents Apple holds. But I mean, if they're not paying taxes, I mean, I guess my question is at what point do we consider it still white, or when does it transition into the gray, right? So, and there's ways. Technology is offering ways that we can go around this problem, right? I mean, 3D printers, right? We can print out our own car eventually, right? You can print out all the components and build it yourself. And cryptocurrencies, right? You can have a business that, on one hand, during the day, if you will, right, makes cars. We're just going to run with this car example, and pays their taxes on those cars being built and sold. And during the night, right, just to use conceptualization of terms here, or of ideas, of metaphors, but during the night, they continue their production, but these cars, right, 20 out of the 100 that were made, 30 out of the 100 that were made in the last 24 hours, whatever, are going to be sold completely on the gray, are going to be sold completely on the black, because the business has a Bitcoin account, and they're trading these other cars to dealers that have Bitcoin accounts, and they are selling them to buyers who have Bitcoin accounts. So, I mean, conceivably, right, we can have the beginning of the Nalevo market, right? What Konkin brought up in a couple sections back in the counter economic section, the left market, right? The black and the gray market. And this is what's going to free us, regardless of how much we're. It's all shades, right? It's all different shades of gray. 50 Shades of Gray, right? No pun intended, but it's different shades. There's people that pay more in taxes than other people. There's people that pay less, right? There's different shades of white to gray, right? But what I'm getting at with that is that technology is allowing us to move more and more to the gray, more fluidly, more easily, without the state apparatus knowing about it. Agorism is inevitable. Counter economics, right, is inevitable. That's just part of human action. When every single act that we do is regulated and considered illegal according to these parasites, then we have no other choice but to use counter economics, but to break their victimless crimes. And that's the option we have. And really, I mean, I don't see how demanding freedom and getting rid of the government is a revolutionary act, right? The state's not going to let this happen through their own means. They're not going to allow this to happen through their own venue. So the revolution is going to be a counter-economic revolution. I mean, this is something that ANCAPs need to come to realize. I'm an ANCAP as well, but I'm also an Agorist, and I realize that production alone isn't going to save us. It's the fact of defying the state. Production while defying the state is what's gonna eventually free us from this. Yeah, and the last chapter here is applied agorism, which we'll cover next week. But just to sum up what we've been covering so far, it's really, I mean, really good stuff. I mean, take notes on this stuff because, I mean, definitely suggest you guys reading this PDF online and double checking everything that he's pointed out. Um, but it's like I said, you know, Konkin's a total human action person, an adherent, a student of Mises, Ludwig von Mises, believes in human action and praxeology and catalytics, right? The idea that humans are rational beings and humans use forethought and planning and strategizing and economizing in their everyday choices and actions. And each human being has their own list of preferable choices and actions. And what else could we ask for? What can be more humane? What can be more freeing and liberating, right? What can be more humane and humanitarian than allowing each and every individual to make their own choice as to where they want to direct their energy, their labor, their time, their life, right? It's their life to live as they please. And the more and more I've gotten into this philosophy, I've just let go of my need to control and manipulate and get people to think the way I think or and all that. I've just this last 2 years have been very liberating as far as all that goes because I see people as people now. I see them as individuals. Each one, each person is you are a queen, you are a king of your own life, of your own property. And few people are willing to recognize that in others, right? They demand to be treated like a king, like a queen. It's easy to demand the treatment, but it's hard to give it in return, right? To give that mutual respect and return. And all these status goons, right? For all you listeners, for all you police officers and FBI agents and CIA guys and anti-terror guys, you guys really need to reanalyze your conscience and really, really think about what you're doing. Research your employer. Research the fact, an employer that's 17 trillion in the red isn't probably a safe employer to work for. Shouldn't really expect too much job security, considering their, you know, murder rate and their theft rate and their non-contract rate. They don't even bother breaking contract. They just don't make them with people and they force you into it. Yeah, that's a good employer to have. Oh yeah, very very good job. Very patriotic there. Good job. Thank you for your service. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I tell people that make sandwiches and people that you know sell me magazines at the corner store. I tell them that they've offered more of a service than all you goons. Right? I tell them every day. Every time I buy something, I have to remind them, whoever it is, hey, thank you. You've given me a bigger service than that police officer down the street, than the judge in that courthouse over there. You've done more of a job. I voluntarily contracted to your terms, unlike this other goon, right? This other guy that forced me to do this crap. It's just ridiculous. Uh, but so Konkin was a total human action guy, praxeology guy. And then as far as economics goes, I mean, come on now. I mean, we've read the primer. All right, let's stop associating agorism with socialism, with collectivism, right? There's no proof for that, except for the Hodgkins quote, which he got wrong, right? Thomas Hodgkins wasn't the first one to coin the term capitalism. So other than that, I mean, I didn't really find anything wrong with Konkin's, foundational outline here for agorism. Nothing. So what else? What else did Konkin talk about? Consistency, right? That's a major thing. We can't stress that enough here on the underground, Agora Underground, is that we are consistent. And as Molyneux, right, brings up, we go all the way with our consistency, baby. We go all the way. And that's what Agorists do, right? More so than anarcho-capitalists, because if an anarcho-capitalist is willing to vote, then you know what? You're not much of an that first phrase there and that second phrase kind of go against voting, don't they? Capitalism and Anarchism kind of voting is kind of like an anti-doctrine, right? An anti-principle to capitalism and anarchy. So I don't understand that. What else? What else do we learn? Very important to make note that, hey, during the French Assembly, we read this, during the French Assembly, right, of the French Revolution, these terms as left wing and right wing originated from that, from the General Assemblies that they would have during the sessions of the first three, the republics, of the different republics that were in France during the revolutions and all that. And we learned that the people that sat on the right were called the conservatives. And the people that sat on the right, the conservatives, were the ones that argued for the maintaining of monarchical power, of power in the monarchy, and the king, and the queen, and the state. While those that sat on the left, known as the liberals, consisted of the capitalists, the laissez-faire, the non-aggressionists, the libertarians. These are the true liberals. This is the true left. This is where Frederick Bastiat and his colleagues sat during the General Assemblies, was on the left side of the aisle. And that's because you can't get any more leftist, anti-status quo, and revolutionary than the market, right? The market. There's nothing more revolutionary than to say that you own yourself, you own your property, you have a right to trade with whoever you want, in privacy, anonymously, with anonymity, and you have the right to keep those earnings from that trade. I mean, that is completely revolutionary. You have a right to defend yourself and have a sword and carry a gun. Revolutionary. These things are leftist concepts, my friends. Right? We come from a long history of slavery, a long history of being serfs, of being peasants for the ruling class. Right? So this is the conservative route. If you defend the state power, if you defend the idea of someone else making decision making for you, of controlling your actions and your wealth and resources, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? You are not a liberal. You are not a leftist. No. You're very much a conservative. You're very much on the right. And this is something we need to take back. We need to take back the leftist term. We need to take back the liberal term. These are terms that we need to take back, because if we continue to allow these statist goons to use terms like, liberal and leftist, people are going to continue to fall for the illusion that somehow they stand for change, somehow they stand for radicalism, for hope, for peace, for freedom, for liberty, for voluntary interactions. Somehow society thinks that they're the ones that stand for that, for the ensurement that people are treated with respect and dignity. That's not what we find, right? That's not what we find in their policies, and their statist policies, and their welfare state, and their collectivism. We don't find that in there. So we need to take back, left. We need to take back liberal, and use these terms and just constantly hammer it in. I'm gonna be doing this nonstop, and I'm gonna find ways to get it out there, because this is something that needs to, one of those ideas, right? If we don't have proper definitions of words and proper concepts of different terms, then when we express ourselves and we're trying to get ideas across to each other, and there's a lack of consistency there, or there's some kind of vague mystification, lack of understanding, then we've completely lost the boat. We can no longer communicate ideas. We can no longer articulate, concepts and ideas in people's heads, because they don't properly understand the words. 1984, right? 2014. What's that? 20 years late. 30 years late, but it's here, right? So, I mean, it's just ridiculous, I do appreciate you guys listening, and I do appreciate being your comrade here on the Agora Underground, your comrade in the revolution. This was the Agora Underground on Voluntary Virtues Network. We'll be back next week. We'll continue reading the Agorist Primer from Samuel Edward Konkin. I'll post some links here at the bottom of the YouTube video. Check out the other shows on the Voluntary Virtues Network. Those guys are doing great. And let's do this. Let's start transitioning to the counter economy. These are applications that we can have in our own life. Let's start taking back terms and ideologies and reclaiming them, because we are the rightful owners and heirs of that. I do appreciate y'all again. I'm tuning out. This was the Agora Underground. I'm Comrade Dick, and cheers to you guys. Have a lovely night. Laissez-faire, y'all.